Politics is a divisive force in modern times. It can impact families whose members may have different views on issues and the solutions to important social problems. The same was true for families in the past. Imagine what it must have been like in the 1800s when one of the most important issues facing the nation was slavery. For members of Dr. Frederick and Rebecca Backus's extended family, the institution of slavery was an issue they grappled with for decades. Family members cared strongly about the issue, but had vastly different opinions on what should be done. These differing opinions would eventually cause an angry rift in the family. In the early 1800s, one popular solution for addressing the issue of slavery was put forth by the American Colonization Society. This organization proposed that the gradual emancipation of enslaved people in the United States should occur and those freed people recolonized to Africa instead of remaining in America. Garrett and Ann Smith, in-laws of Dr. Backus, began supporting this position in the early 1820s. Dr. and Mrs. Backus also began favoring this plan as a solution to ending slavery. In a letter written on March 30th, 1836, Dr. Backus stated,
"I am in favor of colonization of colored people in Africa. They never will be happy and become men until they are by themselves. This plan confers the highest favor upon our colored population and places them in a situation where they are most happy."
The doctor's brother-in-law, Garrett Smith, was an extremely wealthy man. He felt his money should be used to benefit those who were oppressed and began providing monetary support to the anti-slavery cause. Garrett also put his voice and pen to the cause of ending slavery as an orator and prolific writer. He would send the Backus family copies of the pamphlets, circulars, and essays he wrote on the topic. Dr. Backus commented on Garrett's writings in a letter on January 22, 1835.
"I have read all your essays that you have been so kind as to forward me, attentively. You are in fact becoming quite a voluminous writer. As a whole, I am pleased with your essays."
Backus went on to caution, however,
"I do hope our friends the abolitionists will lower their tone and become reasonable beings. With us the fever is subsiding. None but the original abolitionists hold on to the whole system, abusing colonization, society, and all."
The Backus family maintained a more moderate anti-slavery opinion as the years went by. Writing from Rochester on March 30, 1836, Dr. Backus said,
"Our citizens generally are not in favor of the dogma of immediate abolition, knowing it entirely unpracticable. Our abolition friends are zealous and seem to be possessed with a monomania on this subject. All other thoughts are entirely driven out from their minds, and this one subject has taken full possession of soul and body."
The Backuses favored a more gradual ending of slavery. The Smiths, however, began to throw themselves into the growing abolitionist movement, which demanded immediate, uncompensated, and unconditional emancipation. The Smiths' estate in Peterborough became a major stop on the Underground Railroad, aiding many freedom seekers who were on their way to Canada, as well as those who decided to settle in the town near the Smiths. Believing education was an important step for black people to gain their freedom, Garrett began an African-American school in Peterborough. Dr. Backus commented upon this in a letter on January 22, 1835.
"How comes on the famous Peterborough School for colored people? We hear much said in the public prints of Mr. and Mrs. Smith having diverse Negroes at their dining table, and of Mr. and Mrs. S. dining with the scholars on the farm." Rebecca shakes her head a little. "Are you raising up some men of remarkable minds, or have you only ordinary men in your school?"
Clearly, the idea of dining with people of color made Dr. and Mrs. Backus uncomfortable. In 1850, the Backus' daughter, Weltha, married a man named Henry Brent. Henry was originally from Washington, D.C., and considering himself a Southern gentleman by birth, held strong pro-slavery beliefs. On April 24, 1852, Henry lashed out in a letter to Garrett after he had sent one of his abolitionist circulars to Henry and Weltha. Henry felt Garrett's philosophy on slavery was fanatical, and Garrett could no longer assume to dictate to his niece, Weltha, regarding her line of conduct regarding the anti-slavery cause. Henry felt that as long as he lived, he would raise his voice against the spread of Garrett's extraordinary abolitionist doctrines. A few days later, Henry's mother-in-law, Rebecca Backus, wrote to her brother-in-law, Garrett. She wanted to express,
Regret that anything that could be deemed unkind or insulting to you should have been dictated by any member of our family. We love you dearly and read your circulars with interest. However, some of the members of the family may differ. I recollect distinctly to have heard Henry B. declare he meant to return your circular, which I said would be extremely discourteous. That he would do so, neither Weltha or myself had the slightest idea. She expressed her disapproval at the same time as strongly as I did. I heard nothing more about it until some time after he received your last communication, when he mentioned the letters that had passed, your feeling insulted, said he was sorry that he had not an idea of offending you, but meant only to express his own opinions. Now, my dear brother, it is not worthwhile to be offended with him. He is so impulsive. I know he was delighted with you when you were here, and though his Southern principles may lead him to say bitter things against abolition and abolitionists, yet he would be the very first man to relieve the slave if he was distressed, and aid him on his way. We all feel bad at what has occurred. Mother B knows nothing about it, and I not a word more than I have told you, as I have never seen the letters. But whatever they may have been, dear brother, let them pass. I trust in the Lord that no root of bitterness shall ever arise to separate any member of our respective families. We have no relatives that are nearer or dearer than yourselves.
A few days later, Rebecca received a reply from Garrett, who wrote,
I thank you for your letter and for the spirit of love and goodness which it breathes. I have no fear that we shall ever be estranged from each other. You refer to Mr. Brent's unfavorable opinions of abolition and abolitionists. Surely I have never demanded his surrender of them, nor insulted him for holding them. In respect to Mr. Brent's return of my circular, it is perhaps not needful that anything more be said. He insists upon his right to return it and informs me that Mrs. Brent agrees with him on this point. I am not disposed to argue the point with them. I prefer to leave them to their convictions and to cherish and honor my own.
Garrett probably doubted the comment about Henry's willingness to aid a distressed enslaved person, but for the sake of the family, the matter would be dropped. The following year, Garrett received a letter from Henry Brent asking to bury the hatchet and shake hands, as his wife Weltha desires it. The family disagreement was over, but Garrett's abolitionist activities would culminate in a bloody national outcome. Garrett became a leading figure in the Kansas Aid Movement, which was a campaign to raise money and show support for anti-slavery settlers moving into the Kansas Territory. It was during this time that he met John Brown. Brown was a militant abolitionist who felt violence was necessary to bring about the end of slavery since peaceful methods had failed. Although he supported peaceful means of ending slavery, Garrett acknowledged that slavery might have to end by means of violence and bloodshed. In 1859, Garrett joined a group of 6 influential Northern abolitionists who supported and financed the plan of Brown's to capture the armory at Harper's Ferry, Virginia, and start an armed slave revolt. The raid failed. Brown and most of the men with him were either killed during the raid or captured and executed afterwards. Garrett's financial involvement was discovered and made public. Rebecca wrote to Garrett from a Rochester home on October 29th.
Dearest brother, dearest because most exposed to danger, we are in great trouble and anxiety for you, fearing that any night a band of ruffians from the south may fire your house and render the lives of yourself and family insecure. You would be safe in any of our cities, even in Rochester, but I know the feeling of the South in regard to you, and depend on it, you are not safe in Peterborough. My house, and Mary begs me to say that hers too, is at your service. Do be persuaded, my dear brother, to think of yourself and use every forecaution at this exciting time. A hint to the wise is sufficient. Let it be so in your case. It will rejoice our hearts to see you and yours.
Despite the possible danger it could bring to her own door, Rebecca was willing to have the Smiths come to Rochester. Unsuccessful attempts were made to have Garrett accused, tried, and hanged with John Brown. Upset by the raid, its outcome, and aftermath, Garrett suffered a mental break, and for several weeks was confined to an asylum. Garrett's health eventually improved, and the Smiths continued their work in the support of ending slavery. Rebecca Backus wrote Garrett on January 28, 1861, after reading a paper containing a recent speech he made in Canada.
I have much feared that the great agitation and excitement of our country might send you again to the hospital, but I have no fears for you now. Go on. May God give you wisdom to awaken all the justice and humanity that is in the North or the South, for it seems to me that men sleep in this crisis most profoundly, and there are few to be found pleading the cause of their oppressed and crushed brethren. The fields of the South are crying out for the wages withheld from the laborer, and the people appear to be sealing to themselves the retribution that waits them. What will be the end of it? God reigns, let the earth rejoice.
War was coming, and would be the final decision on the issue of slavery. Like many families today, the extended Backus family found themselves embroiled in the national discussion on race and equality. Members passionately cling to their opinions, occasionally to painful and dangerous ends at times. Despite the political and social disagreements, however, the familiar bonds remain strong with the Backus family.